Okay, so instead of doing the normal model, then rig it up and show it to you, since this video is more about getting the avatar into virtual reality, I'm going to assume that you already have a model or a head, and we're going to go ahead and just take this character's head and rig it to the Hubs rig, and then I'll show how to do this model, or how I created this model in the first place, in the video after that. So what we have is this Cheshire Cat model. I've gone and done a bunch of retopology based on a sculpt, so he's fairly low poly. And then I added these whiskers off of the sides. So what we're going to show you is, let's open, if you go to Hubs, if you go to Google, GitHub, you just want to look for Hubs avatar or custom avatar, maybe Mozilla, and this should bring you to this Hubs avatar pipelines. You're going to need to clone this to a GitHub repository. I'm not going to show how to do that, but the one thing that's important is before you do that, you're going to need to install this git LFS, and it'll show how to do that. If you go to the git LFS site, basically this is just a large file system sort of plugin for Git that allows you to download specific files. Takes a little work to get through that. I won't show it here, but the gist is you need that in order to be able to get to these Blender files. Once you get that, you'll have a repository, and then I've got this Hubs avatars. Here's the Hubs avatars pipelines, and then you'll see this, you get the same file here, and the ones that you're interested in are in Blender, avatar bot, and we're going to look at this avatar base for export. There's this avatar alt body as well. Either one of these work fine. What we really care more about is the skeleton itself. So once you get all that downloaded, you can open that avatar base for export blend, and then this is what that it'll come in like this on the animation. This is the way it was saved on the GitHub. It may be different by the time you open it up. We're just going to look at the modeling part, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So if we select, just to get this centered, this is the base Hubs avatar. It's a body with a floating head, a robot, some eyes, and hands. And the hands, the animations that you saw were some blinking of the eyes and the hand position stuff. And right now, the way this thing is set up, it's flipped. So if you, or it's mirrored. So if you look at the modifiers on it, it's going to have this mirror modifier. If you try to apply that so that you get this thing sort of flattened, it's going to say modifier cannot be applied to a mesh with shape keys, because this thing has some mouth shapes applied to it. Don't worry about that. You don't really care about those mouth shapes. That's sort of an experimental aspect that they were trying to get working with this avatar. What we really care about for the purposes of this tutorial is just getting our custom model onto this rig. And that's the reason I opened this model, is rather than go and try to recreate this thing from scratch, you might lose some function that causes it to behave weird. I'm just going to import our cat head and then replace the body part of this with the cat head, keep the hands, maybe change the hand texture to something that matches the color for the cat, and then we'll import that. So one other thing to think about here is that how is this thing rigged right now? So if we go into pose, let's select the skeleton object mode, pose mode, you can see that the head, rotate. Oh, that's another thing about this too, is that the the way it's set, the view is not showing the widgets. So when I go to hit rotate, it's not actually bringing up the rotate feature. What you need to do is it's turned off up here under this show gizmo. So right now it's showing the gizmos for everything, except if you pull down on the arrow, the active tool is not showing. So now whatever the active tool is, if I hit W, you'll see the gizmo for it, so that we can do a rotate and show that yes, the head is attached to this head. These eyes are attached to the eye bones. The neck will then move the head as well, but that's because the head bone's attached. And then the body, the whole body is attached to this torso as opposed to this hip bone. So what we can do is import, let's go out of pose mode. We'll import based on those bones. If you look at the way they're assigned in the skeleton on the here, the skin. If you look at the, close up the mirror, there's an armature, and it's looking at vertex groups, which are basically all the bone groups. They're just 100% applied to each bone. So you're going to have a head bone, you'll have a right eye, left eye, and that's pretty much all we'll need for the cat. So if we pull the cat in, another thing, if you haven't tried to merge models in Blender, it's a little bit tricky. It's different than you might do in Maya or some other program. Basically, you have this append function, and you want to find your object that you want to bring in. So we'll look under, I believe it's under 3D models. Yep. And then there should be a Cheshire cat. And then we're looking at this fat Cheshire cat textured blend. Once you open that, instead of opening a model, it's going to show you all of the content within the model, the world. And pretty much all we're going to need is the collection. You may want the material too later, but the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to pull that collection in under the active collection, which is right now the avatar root. So just append that. That's going to bring the whole thing in really big. We've got everything that we had in the other model, including the original sculpt, which we can delete because we don't need that. So here's our collection with, let's check out our shading. Yeah, see, we don't have a material when we select that. It's showing it, but it's pulling it from the other. Oh, wait, there it is, actually. Yeah, okay. So everything's in. That's good. We just need to get this thing scaled and positioned. This is why I kind of merged them with the skeleton in place, so and the model in place, so I can see. So if we had R, scale down, move it up. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Depending on, there's functionality in Hubs that's going to let you see from within this head, and so far it seems a little bit buggy. We'll see if I can figure that out over time, but for now this is how I've been able to get the avatar in there. But you probably want to scale it down to get it something close to the size of the original head that was in there. Another thing, let me turn off snapping. Another thing I've noticed is that for some reason, when I go and combine all of this together and get this bone, everything parented to the bone in Blender, once you bring it into Hubs, and I'll show you this when we do that, the rotation is weird. It doesn't seem to rotate the head based on the bone position. It seems to be like that there's some sort of an attachment or node or null object that's causing this head to rotate almost from the nose in Hubs. But for now, if we go to F2, I'm just going to position this where I think it should go, and then we'll fix the eyes and everything. Let's call that pretty good for now. It's good enough. So we've got this set up as a separate object in its own collection. Let's just hide that collection while we sort through getting this thing deleted. So let's take the avatar, go into edit mode, and again you see that there's this mirror flip going on, this mirroring of the hands. We won't care about that for now. We're just going to go ahead and delete, turn on X-ray so we can select all the faces through, and just delete the faces for the body. That keeps the bones and keeps the hands. So now when we turn our head back on, so we've got this avatar model up here, and then we have our Cheshire Cat model. We can lose this light that we brought in from the other, delete, and the camera. So we'll just have this Cheshire Cat head in its separate collection. Turn that on, and we probably want to go and position the eyes, the eye bones, because we've kind of got the head position where we want it to for the head bone, but we want to go and position the eye bones. So if we turn that on, you can see that the eyes, I mean, maybe want to even do it in wireframe so we can see the center of the eye orbit. And we also need to select these bones. We're in object mode. There we go. If we go to edit and then select these bones and then hit F2, bring up our widget and just pull them up to get them on the center line of the eye orbs for the cat, and zoom in to try to get it close. Now, then we have to go to the front and do the same, but you don't want to move them both. So go to just select one, hit the front or even the top. Yeah, the top's probably better. And then pull it to the center. That's good. Select this one, pull it. It's hard to tell what's the center. And actually I didn't get this one on the center. I put it to the center of the eye socket, excuse me. Make sure you select the entire bone. See, this is, I've got it on this line, but it should be on this one. So put it there. And that looks good. So now, the tricky part. We want to join these. Go to object mode and join the hands to the head. So in order to keep the groups, keep the vertex groups, but we don't have vertex groups on this, so I'm going to show you how to create the vertex groups that we need, and then we can try to fix the weights as well. So we're going to need a head group, which will be everything except for the eyes, and then the left eye and the right eye. So what you do to make a vertex group is, and probably the whiskers too, which is going to make it a little tricky. Go to edit mode, select by face, and you can just drag select across all of these whiskers. The main thing is we don't want to get the eyes. And then if you hit the bracket and leave it at select linked all at normal, you're going to get everything except for what you selected. In this case, we didn't get the teeth. I'll just add those. So now we have everything selected except for the eyes. And we want to go to the vertex group and just call this group make a vertex group called head. I can't remember if it's capitalized. I think it is. And then before you deselect that, deselect these, say assign, so that when you deselect it and hit select, it'll select all of those vertices. Now we have our head vertex group, and you can do the same thing for the eye. Just hit bracket, select it all, and this would be the left eye as you're looking out from the avatar. So we make a left eye, and you can just know what the names of these need to be based on the bones themselves. We'll look at that in a second. I think it's cat left eye, and hit bracket on the right eye. Make a new. I didn't apply that group, but it's okay. We can do that again. Right eye, assign. Check it by doing a select. Hit bracket for left eye, assign. Check it by doing, yep. Okay, so now those are assigned, and we have those groups. We can go ahead and get rid of these. These were for something else when I was doing the painting. Okay, so now we have the vertex groups for the head, and we just want to double check and make sure that that's the name for the bones. So I'm up here under the armature looking at neck. So yeah, head's capitalized and right eye, left eye, both caps. Okay. What we want to do is join these two, the avatar and the Cheshire head. Probably do it with the avatar selected last so that it becomes the parent name. We don't have to rename it. And under object mode, we'll say object join. Join them under the other. Still okay. Make sure, yeah, we lost our modifier. That's fine. Although we lost the hand. So undo. What we're going to do is go to delete these shape poses on the hands or on the original avatar. So you do that under the vertex groups down here. There'll be these shape keys. So there's a basis and a blink. Just delete them both. Make sure you don't delete the vertex groups. And then if we go to the modifier, we can apply the mirror. So that keeps that makes the hands combined then. And then we want to try to keep this armature. So in order to do that, let me think. We can select this and try to put it in that collection. Nope. So we've moved it into the collection low. We can lose this collection now. And then select these two objects, join. But we lost our armature. Let's try it the opposite way. Select this and then that. Object join. Yep, that helped to keep the armature. So you'll select the avatar first and then the head, and that ends up combining them now so that we still have our mesh combined. Now what's going to happen is if those vertex groups worked and we select the armature, everything should work as opposed. So the head works, and then you can check the eye. Yep. Okay, so those are all good. But just to double check, go back to object, select the model, and then hit weight paint. And then if you go to your vertex groups and check the head, let's check it. Just make sure everything's red. That's the full weight. And then right eye. Look inside. Yep. Left eye. Yep. Okay. So now we have everything set up. Let's double check I lost my material because should still be there, but I've got this bot PBS burst and then fur there. So if we go and look at shading, yep, there's our material. So what we can do is lose the bot PBS and oops, unable to remove material slot in edit mode. Oh, because we're in edit mode. Lose that. And that keeps the fur. For some reason, did I lose the UVs? Let's double check. Yep, they're not showing up. Let me think. So that's the UV maps, which would show up under these as well, and they would be here. Oh, okay, that's why. Because the original bot had its own UV map, it's set for map 1, and the one that came in with the cat is UV2. We just need to snap that. So there's our UVs. They just showed up, but now the hands are going to be turned wrong. We can lose this UV map because we don't need it anymore. So now our object should show, but the hands are not UV mapped for the cat. All we have to do to fix that is select, edit, let's go to F2, and I'm just going to select in wireframe mode or X-ray mode, select across both of the hands and do a UV project from view, and then we get these hands here. I'm just going to select them in the map, and I just want to put them somewhere. Oops. Oh, right now they're also set to scale independently. You can fix that by setting right here. Instead of by vertex, set the center. Nope, it's still scaling. Increments, still. Oh, bounding box right here. There, that scales them. And we just want to scale them down. They don't. It doesn't matter that they're overlapping. And we'll put them like in the ear where there's no apparent ambient occlusion that we've added. So, because it got all over the light, but you could also put them in one of these purple areas if we'd made that match too. The point is just to try to get them using the exact same UV map now, so that if we look at this, they will show up as part of the year. Which is weird, but it's okay that they overlap. But what that means is now they'll be the same color as the cat head, so they kind of blend. And we have their animations and functions set and the cat set. And all we have to do to get this in the hubs now is to export the whole thing. So we've got our avatar, animations, pose, armature, and then we've got it combined. So if we just go to File and export GLTF, it's got to be a GLB. And it'll be under here, this GLTF binary.glb. And we want to make sure in terms of including stuff. Don't worry about if you want to select just the things, or if you have multiple objects, you can do it by selected objects. But since we didn't select anything on the model, we can just leave it selected, or leave the selected objects unchecked. Make sure we apply UVs, normals, vertex colors, all that. Don't worry about the apply modifiers either. And save the animations. And then we'll put that in the same folder with the cat. And we're going to call it Cheshire Fat Cat, just to delineate. I've got another version that's a little bit skinnier. So then we'll export. And then if you go into, you'll see this little dark cursor. It's thinking. It'll export. And if we go look at the model, just to make sure, yep, 2.45 megabytes, so that it's we know that it's got some data in there. Sometimes, depending on how you've set it to export, it'll be a smaller file. So now if you go to Hubs, the way you get this onto your avatar is go Hubs, Mozilla, and we'll just say create a room. You should be logged in so that this saves in your avatars. Say enter room, and then you'll come to your avatar selection. You can do browse avatars. So in this case, here's my old avatar. I want to create a new one. And then under the new options, you can do skins and things like that. For this, we're going to call them Fat Cheshire. And then we're going to do this custom GLB. And find where you saved it. Cheshire Fat Cat. And he'll show up so that you can see him, and you see he's got his hands. And then if you want to allow promotion and remixing and attribution, all that, just do that. We'll save this. And you can select your avatar and account or accept. Enter on screen. I'm going to turn off this microphone and we'll go into the room. So this is Hubs, and now I'm in this avatar. And the way you can't see yourself. And the other thing is, if you're in virtual reality mode, if you got a headset on, then your hands will show up. But if you're doing it on a computer, they won't. So the way you can see that this avatar is working is if you go to share the room, just do this. I'm going to go and paste this someplace where I can log in from another account. In this case, I'll do the Slack. I got in on my iPad and coming towards the avatar. So there I am. And you can see, based on the head, this is me moving it around on my iPad, that it works. And you can see what I'm talking about in terms of sort of rotates around the nose, even though the head is, obviously positioned at the back, so it's rotating a little bit weird. I think that's something I'm doing in the avatar creation, or if I had a body, you'd see that it was because when you do the same thing with the default avatar, there seems to be this thing that sort of picks up the avatar from the neck. So let me just do that. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to edit this and just make it a default. just one of their, so it just swaps, and then, so this is like a default boxy version of the avatar, and you can see that even when this rotates, it's still rotating around the front of the avatar, and you can see how the body kind of gets picked up by it. So that's what you're seeing, is like no matter how this thing seems to get rigged, rotation seems to be based on some weird center point that's attached to the front of the model. But anyway, that's the custom avatar creation, as best as I've been able to figure it out so far for Hubs. And now for the rest of this video, I'm going to show you how I actually created this model from scratch and go about baking some textures and stuff. So if you have any questions, just post them in the comments. If you know of anything that I'm doing wrong based on what you've seen in this video and your own experimentation with Hubs, just let me know. Thanks. Just so we have a little bit more detail. And from that, then we will go to sculpting. So in Blender 2.8, the new sculpting tools, there's a lot. So what we can do is we'll crunch these into, I just pulled the palette across to get it a little bit wider, and we could show more of the options. So one of the things in sculpting in Blender is if you use these brushes, depending on how they're set up by default, and the way you can see, like these are the brushes, you'll see draw sharp, draw, clay strips, layer, inflate, a bunch of others. Depending on which one you go into, as you change them, if you're on the tool that you have selected over in the panel on the right, you'll see the setup for that brush. You can also see it if you open up this item and select tool. You can see it there, and then that way you can open your view a little bit bigger, lose these viewports, and just have it opened here. So the brush in 2.81, the sculpting's changed a lot. The first thing I probably want to do is, it's kind of hard to see the difference in this the brush setting itself because it's a little light. So I'll go into, I want to basically set it to display, and have, could do a custom icon. These are the colors that it's going to display for the brush, different ones, so you can set up, in this case I'm just going to go bright so we can actually see. We'll do something different for each one. So there's, you can tell by me setting that, let's go like maybe purple, I'm trying to, yeah, so right now it's set up to subtract by default, and then if I hold down Control, it'll be add, but it's not changing for some reason. That may be a bug. Wait, it's like the the difference being that one is bigger than, or one goes in and one goes out, and there's usually a default setting. So like you can see that when I go in and I sculpt, it's pushing those points in, and when I hold down Control, it's pulling them out. And that's the way most of these brushes work. They have an alt setting. It's from, if you're familiar with ZBrush, it's very much like that. So if I set, yeah, so it's interesting. The Control will not update the brush color, but if I toggle between them with the direction, add and subtract, then it does change the cursor. So you can see the red cursor then. And you can also, if you right click, you can bring up these settings and adjust without having to go and zoom around. What else? Auto smooth is basically the stroke, or whether it'll auto smooth the mesh. Let's see, because there is There's your symmetry option, so you can turn that on. So that right now I'm painting on both sides of the X. And then there's a remesh option where you would have to click this button and it would remesh the or redraw the mesh or create more topology. And I'll show you where that comes in handy in a second. Then you can add textures to create kind of an alpha for how the brush affects the mesh. In this case, the mesh is too low poly to really show anything like that. And then the stroke, spacing, and then this smooth stroke right here will actually, so let's, one of the new functions as well in sculpting is this remesh option up here. And what I can do is I can just hit remesh, and you'll see where it's gone and generated in wireframe a new mesh based on what it had. This was a polar coordinates sphere before. And then under that remesh, there's a couple of options for the type of remesh that it's going to do. And then there's this dynamic topo option up here, which would basically, if we paint, let me turn on, let's go back to shaded or model, and then I'm going to turn on in the viewport, I just want to turn on the wireframe so we can see it, so we'll be able to see the difference. So now if I turn on this dynamic topo option, it'll say vertex data detected, which means it basically has UVs or whatever. It's going to lose all that if we do this dynamic topo, but the dynamic topo is kind of handy for getting more detail where you need it. So if we turn that on, notice that it triangulates the whole thing. And then if I go and I paint, oops, let's make sure. This is the first version of 2.81, so it may be that it's a little, dynamic topo's on there. It doesn't seem to be doing anything though. Let's see. That's interesting. Oh, it might be because I'm on draw sharp. Let's go and try it on this. Certain brushes are going to behave differently depending on their fall off curve. So this, I don't have the symmetry, the dynamic topo turned on. If I turn it on, say okay. Now you can see where it goes and adds all of this detail. And based on your zoom level, the detail is going to be based on the viewport display, the size of the brush, and the detail size. So if I crank that up, it's going to have a little less detail size. So you have to kind of find the setting for how you want to work. And you can see where it's going to go and do this all over until you've gone, so like as I zoomed out, it got a little less dynamic topo. But it's a good way to kind of constructively make the mesh without having to go and constantly do a remesh or things like that. So I'm probably going to leave the dynamic topo on for the purposes of getting this sculpt done quickly. And one of the other things I want to show you though is that the dynamic topo also works when you I hold down shift, which is the smooth brush by default. It's going to go back and just smooth out the topology, but that smooth brush, which is here, you can see the icon, what it's intending to do. Yeah, dynamic topo is turned on. So if I go and I smooth, depending on the detail, it'll lessen. So let's zoom in. Go back here, add some detail. Now, when that detail's there, hold down smooth, at this level, it's going to smooth it out, but it'll keep the detail. which may or may not be useful depending on what you want to do. Or you can just zoom out and then hold down smooth. Smooth doesn't seem to be doing the detail. It's not optimizing. Yeah, turn on optimize. Nope. Yeah, we can turn on smooth shading to help. Detailing. Yeah, it's not. Okay. So in some ways, this thing is still a work in progress. I could have sworn I got the smooth working. What I did to get the detail to go back to something more useful, so just hit Control to kind of like push back on it. So it's like, here's just sculpting, you get the detail. If you want to smooth it out, you can smooth it out to get that, and then hold down Control just or something just to get it, and then smooth again just to get whatever detail level you want. So it's a bit of a trick. One of the things you're going to want to do probably first and foremost is to get this pole fixed, because when you get these triangles going in like this around an orientation, like a circle, it's going to get all kinds of pinching. And all you have to do to fix that is just brush across, and now you've got some good topology. Same thing on the bottom. Okay, so we want to make a Cheshire Cat head. One of the brushes that I really like is this elastic Deform, because you can kind of like Play-Doh sculpt out bigger, like a rough shape. So I'm just going to go big. So in this case, I'm just stretching out the jaw, the front of the head, smooth that. And start to pull out some ears. Now notice, I'm just doing it super rough right now. It's okay, because we can always come back and smooth again. But it's better to work. It's better to work at this sort of super low detail to get a rough idea of the topology and shape, and then go and do a remesh or paint with your dynamic topo turned on, in order to get the shape just right. And one of the more important parts is to make sure that your fall off and your radius for your brush is set at enough of a resolution in order to get enough of the topology, because otherwise if you pull something out, like in this case the jawline, and it's too small, you're just going to be doing a lot of pulling and get this really rough kind of shape. So right now I'm just trying to keep the shape relatively smooth. And pulling in the nose, the eyes. It's pretty good. Now we got a rough shape for our head, except for maybe the back of it. Let's pull that out a little bit. And these ears can come back. Maybe bigger on the jaws in the back. He's got a big mouth. Yeah, I'm digging that. All right, so then we can start to paint in the detail using this draw brush and go smaller with our radius, depending on where you're at. So right now, yeah, draw. I lost all my settings on the, that's weird. I lost the settings on my add subtract. So there's another bug in 2.81 that needs to be fixed. So I apologize if for some reason I forget to reset that so that it's hard to see the cursor on the screen. All right, so Right now we're on add because it's red, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out a nose. Alright, so what we can do is if we go into modeling, get out of edit mode, object, we're just going to add mesh UV sphere. We can rotate it 90 degrees and render it smooth, shade smooth. Scale it and then bring it up into position as an eye. And where that is we're going to kind of sculpt the head around it. But one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that it's symmetrical. So we'll add to this, we're going to add a modifier. It'll be mirror. And then we're going to mirror it across the actual cat head. So that we get a second eye in a different position. And then we can just position these where we want them. Probably a little lower. Yeah, something like that. I think that'll work okay. We can always come back and reposition. So now if we go back to sculpt, we can move everything around. So basically I'm just kind of sculpting this. The dynamic topo popped off. let's go ahead and save. Probably should have been doing that all along, but so far Blender 2.81 is pretty stable, as you can tell. So let's save this as Fat Cheshire. Alright, so from here, there's a couple of things you can do. Obviously, this is a lot of polygons. We're looking at 113,000 tries, triangles. And one of the things we want to do, if we're going to take this into like a VR type application, is get the count way down. So to do that, we can do a couple of things. We should probably, sorry, I'm still working on this. Should probably remesh it. So there's a couple of new cool tools that allow us to do that in some pretty quick ways. Because right now, there's no, well, there's some topology in terms of the across the X, but it's not optimized. So there's this under modeling. Let's just go to the modeling object. Here's our mesh. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off the wireframe for now. Actually, let's leave that on while I remesh this. So if you select the head and then go to, if you look under the verts, there'll be this triangle connected by vertices here. It's called the object data properties. Let's see. Yeah, right below the object constraints properties and above the material. This is where you'll normally make all your vertex groups and things like that. There's this remesh option. By default, it's set to voxel, which is similar to what we were doing when we were remeshing it in the sculpt mode. And I'll just show you what that looks like for now. Fix pole, smooth normals, we'll go for that. And we'll leave that. We'll just do a voxel remesh, and you see what it does. And this is like the open subdivision standard. It's not great. What we can do if you want to like play around with that is crank up the voxel size. Actually, crank it down. Thinking I may have just crashed it because I cranked it down so small it's going to add polys instead of so yeah, we crashed. So what we want to do, just to show you, let's go a little bit more incremental in the remesh on that. So let's try the remesh voxel. Right now it's at 0.1 meters. Let's go like 0.04. Let's try that. So you can see what it's trying to do. It's creating, and it's not optimal right across. It does its best. And these are all quads. It's sort of like a Minecrafty type of voxel remesh. But there's a new, better way of doing this, which is the quad remesh, quadraflow remesh. It's going to take a little bit longer to do it. When you click on it, it's going to pop up a window. So you can use paint symmetry. It says generate a symmetrical mesh using the paint symmetry configuration. You can preserve sharp, which we don't really have. Preserve mesh bounds. Use mesh curvature, we definitely want that. Preserve paint mask, we don't have that. And smooth the normals, we'll go for that. Then you have it based on different things. You may want to do by faces, and you're going to go for a count. Right now we're at 100,000, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to try 8,000 and see what happens. It may be that the teeth eat up more, or I might need more for the teeth. So let's see. And it's thinking about it. You can see the progress down here. It's at 50%. It's not, you can see it's not terrible for a low poly mesh. It's looks like it's 8,000 faces, 17,000 tries, but it's obviously got some issues in the eyes. And it's doing an all over equal mesh again, which is not great because like some of these bigger, smoother areas, we don't need as much topology. So what we can do to get better topology than the just traditional remesh, which is going to do an all over kind of equal topology, so we can add a plane, pull that out in front, go to object or edit the plane, and then turning on snap to face, we can grab the points and move them up to where we want to start the topology or the retopology. So you can see where it's snapping this mesh or the plane to this surface. What we want to do is on that, for the plane, let's make it sit in front. So if you go to object properties and then viewport display, just do in front, and that'll snap your plane to be in front, and then you can change the material on the plane. We should go out to object mode, make a new material, and just give it base color. Let's make it blue, and you'll want to set it to this. If well, if you set it to viewport shading, the in front will get lost. So you want to be in viewport shading for solid, not viewport shading EV or material preview. And then down on the material, go to viewport display. Just change this white in the viewport display to a blue, and it'll show it blue that way. On top of that, we want to put a mirror on this, so we only have to retopologize half of the faces. So if we go to, with the plane selected, where was it? Here. Add a modifier and mirror, and then you're going to want to turn on merge in the options, so that when we snap these things to the center, the points will merge. So now with that, we can go and go back into edit mode, grab our points, and get them to a center line. Oh, we want to turn on, leaf snapping face turned on. And as you move these, you'll see where actually they're not snapping. Clipping, merge limits. Should do it. Let's just work on it and see if it starts to work. We can always come back and snap these later, but there it went. It's pretty fine, but depends on the size of your model. But you can see where once you get it to a certain point, it kind of snaps to center and joins up like that. So you can increase the distance of that merge like to 0.35. So now when I move them a certain point, see how they just sort of join up. Alright, so Let's get it to something a little more reasonable. Yeah, 1.3. All right. Now the trick here is we want to make these polygons bigger to get the detail, but not so big that it starts to, or not so big that we lose any detail. So try to find the kind of like your ideal size for your polygons here. And with that selected, click on your polybuild tool. Now when you get this, the way it's working in 2.81, you'll get this line as you move around each poly. From that you can just pull off to the side, and then you can just grab these points and move them around. And if you grab a point, or if you grab this edge and you hold down Control, you can just pull out a triangle from that edge, and then the same thing again. So it gives you kind of a finer control and being able to move points around. So what I want to do is figure out kind of the rough size of these polys, the way I want to build them. It's probably pretty good for now. And then from that you can just start to construct. Now the bigger you make these, the less work you're going to have to do in terms of getting this thing to work out. And what we may end up doing is making 2 of these retopologies. We may make one just for the teeth and then one for this head, so that we can have less polys on the head and more for the teeth. So just pull out your points. You'll see it snap. And then once you get something like this corner here, all you have to do is hold down Control, get to, you'll see this little blue vertex light up, hold down Control, and then you can just pull out a quad from those corners. Like that. And because I have this snapping to face, it's basically finding my topology and creating a surface that's a much lower poly count. And we can go and move these points around later. Alright, so I'm going to go and try to retopologize this as quickly as possible, and then we'll pick up from there. Alright, so one thing I want to show is, like, sometimes you're going to need to get extra geometry out of something. So the way you do that is when you've pulled out one of these points here, I kind of want to do this where I bring this in, and I want to pull a face. Actually, I want to pull this up a little bit here, because I want a face to come this way and I want one to go this way. So we can go ahead and pull this one down. And what we can do is just pull one off to this side and then one off to this side. And because these aren't joined now, we've inserted sort of a trifold area where we can, and you can do the same thing again, where we can add extra geometry. So basically by doing that, we're getting extra detail out of this corner, a lot of extra detail. What that does is then we can pull, like we're going to have a face like this, so we get a lot more detail on the nose, and we've got like detail here, and that allows us to get go from a high poly count into a relatively, or a low poly count into a higher poly count. I may have actually added too many, but we'll see. We can always take them out later. So go down the nose. Again, stay big as possible, so that you don't end up having to do extra mesh creation. Okay, and then this is too much for now. So what I did is I did make too many faces, so we can just come back and delete. By selecting by face, we can delete, let's delete all 3 of these. Just delete those faces, and then come back and work this to see what we need to do to make it better, or better poly count. Yeah, that looks better. So this should come down here, and that can be across the top. Yeah. And then just go back to your poly build, and then pull out a face there. Oops, actually, point. So you can see where this gives you a lot more control. This way of kind of retopologizing gives you a lot more control over the final face count, and you can get super low poly this way without losing any detail in the mesh. So I'm just going and snapping these because when I did the original extrude, the points don't always line up. So just click on your points. It's a thing I noticed in 2.81. Even though we'll have snapped a face on, it doesn't always do it with the poly build tool. You can see how they're just sort of starting to snap a little bit better. And pretty good. All right, so now what we want to do is go ahead and set up seams for unwrapping. So all you have to do that is you can just double click along the center line because we want to unwrap around the center. And I mean, for the purposes, in fact, we can probably just leave that and make that a seam. So what you want to do is double click on the edge and then mark seam. You'll get a red line down the center. And then we want to find something that wraps around. Probably that'll work. I'm just double clicking to select around. So then we get the kind of mask that way. Mark that as a seam. And we want to go ahead and cut out the eyes. Let me hide the eyes. And I want to cut on this inner seam. So that we can cut out the interior eye for UV mapping. So mark seam. You may want to let's do this. Mark those so it slices in a little better. And let's see what else. Mouth. And the teeth. We do a UV unwrap, UV editing, go into edit mode, select using the X-ray. That way you select everything and then just do UV unwrap. And we get something like that. One thing that'll give us a much better unwrap is if we take all of this and come back into object mode and object apply all transforms for each one. Because right now they have a bunch of odd scales to them in terms of how they've been created. So and then the teeth. Then edit. So now watch what happens if you do an unwrap with that transform applied. UV unwrap kind of lays things out in a more appropriate way based on the scale, so that we get some good overlap, or that everything is at least the right scale proportionally. The teeth, they seem didn't cut all the way across. Doesn't look like. Let me check. Objects moved. Seems to do a good job. It's good enough for now. One of the things you can do is you can select all these seams once you have that, and if you do UV minimize stretch, it'll go and run an algorithm in a certain number of iterations to kind of minimize the stretch over all of these seams. And should clean up any kind of weird overlay. So there's our gums, eyes, teeth. Yep. Okay, good. Let's see if we can lay it out any better. UV pack islands. Nope, that's pretty much it. It's all right. All right, so now, if we go back to the modeling, there's a couple of things we can do to bake the textures. So first and foremost, I just want to show you how to do an ambient occlusion map texture. So let's go ahead, since we have all of the UVs applied equally, we're going to join everything up. So object, join. So now it's all one texture map. Well, two. That's why our eyes changed colors. But what we can do is apply some materials to fix things. So we look at our material here. We have this blue, which would be the all over, kind of the cat blue fur. And this is our teeth. Let's go ahead and call it teeth. We'll call this fur. We're going to make one for eyes. New, call it eyes. And we will apply that to these eyeballs. And just hit bracket to select everything. Make sure that you don't do it by seam, you do it by normal so that it selects the entire object inside and out. And then we're just going to apply the eyes to that, assign that. We're going to crank up or crank down the roughness so that they're shiny. And object. So now we're getting this. Let me go to our cat fur and fix the color on that. Maybe we want to make it more bluish purple. And not so shiny. But we do want our teeth to be shiny. Okay. So there's that. Maybe we want some darker eyes. Let's hide the eyeball. So the way now that we've joined these that we can hide the eyes is if we go into edit mode with these selected and then just go under mesh, hide selected. And what we can do is we can double click, with faces, not that. Trying to get these, we'll just select, drag select as long as you don't have X-ray mode turned on. And this will be our kind of eye black or mascara form. So now that we've selected that, we can make a new material. Call this eye black. and make it kind of a bluish black, and assign it to that. We'll make it a little bit more reflective, and the same with this mask. Make sure you do it mirrored. And to thicken it, you pull these down. These can come up. Maybe back. Same thing. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Okay, so and we could probably use a little more eye black, especially up here. Could be that we can just do it with sculpting. Oh, the issue is that I've hidden the eye, so let me go back to modeling, and we'll do mesh, show, reveal hidden, and then if we go to sculpting, but I'm also editing the eyeball now because it's there. So basically I just need to pull these forward. Let's go back to modeling, mesh, selected, and go back to sculpting. Then go back to modeling, mesh. It's better. It might be that in sculpting, no. So you can mask. Oops. So the one thing you can do is if you wanted to do this and just mask the eyeball, so you can mess with the eyelid to get it more and not affect this in the sculpt mode, is to set your options, yeah, topology auto masking. So now when I do mask close to the edge, because I'm masking, I started by brushing on the eyeball, it's not masking out his mask right here. So you've got sculpts, and then you've got mask, and so you can invert the mask. That'll mask everything else, and what we want to do is just clear it. Okay, and now we can go back to modeling. think, yeah, so now save. We'll show you, we've got them UV mapped and transforms are all set to norm or 0. Now what we can do is if we do shading and we want to bake, we can bake this texture, all of these materials to a single texture, and then if we wanted to go and modify that, we can. So the way you bake is to go add texture, image texture, new, we'll call this color. Oops. And accidentally, let me delete that. Make another, add texture, image texture, new, we're going to make it 2048. Say okay, call it color, map. And then with that selected, if you go to render, this little TV option here, instead of set it to Eevee, set it to cycles. And then you're going to have this bake option right here. What we want to bake is not combined, we want to bake diffuse. And instead of diffuse, direct, and indirect, we just want the color. So you can deselect these and set, it should work just that way, and then just hit the bake. And what you'll see over here in this window is it will bake. So we want to set our image to color map, zoom out, then hit bake. You're going to see texture bake going on down here, and it's going to count up. And so there's, let's see if it did. Oh, because I've got multiple textures. I'm on eye black, and it only did the eyes. Need to paint. I need to copy this map. Copy. And go into each one of the slots on this. So I need to put the same texture color map. I'm just copy and pasting into each. There we go. Then go back, hit bake. But I only pasted it into the mouth, so it just baked that one. Looks pretty much the same. Okay, now we want to make sure we save this. Image, save as. And yeah, we'll save it there. Color map. Now we want to make a new texture. We can go ahead and close or delete the color map here in each one of these. So we're going to add texture, image texture, new, and we'll call this Ambient Occlusion. And if you're not familiar with, I'm just going to copy that. If you're not familiar with ambient occlusion, it's basically a map that just is where objects sort of self-shadow. You'll see what I mean when we go to do it. Okay, so I've just gone and gotten rid of the color maps, put the ambient occlusions in. Notice that these don't have to be connected to anything, because the main thing is we just need to target them here. as being the texture that we're targeting. And then if we go to render, change it to ambient occlusion. I'm going to bake a low res one first just to show you what it looks like. And it's doing a texture bake. This takes a little bit longer because it's got to find the edges and project them from a kind of cage around the object. Wow, that's ugly. Oh, I know why. So, one thing I've noticed is when it's baking, we are getting this original sculpted mesh that we've baked, and it's the way it's overlapping here. So what you can do is you can just say, select that, and then under objects, it's settings. We just want to turn off its ability to render, this visibility, show in renders. So we can show it in viewports, yeah. And then just hide that. Now if we go back and hit bake, we should clean up a lot. And this is what the ambient occlusion looks like. So you can see how it's going to do the teeth and give me the edges the way I want them. And this is the ambient occlusion over here. So once we have that, let me go back to turn back on combined, and we'll go back to EV. This is our EV render object. There. We need to save our ambient occlusion. Just call it cats. Alright, so if you want to see what that would look like and as a texture, just apply it to the base color. It's only in, whoops. It's only in this particular slot, but we can go and paste it or link it up in each one. Oh, I have to move the eyes back. So there's the ambient occlusion just applied. Edit. Let's go into X-ray mode, select those and pull them down into place. Probably don't want to be in X-ray mode too much for this. I think that's good. Yeah, the teeth look good. Alright, so in the next, I'll make another video, and we will, I'm going to show how to piece these together, the texture and the ambient occlusion, and then we'll go and we'll apply it to an avatar and pull it into, we're going to pull it into hubs. I'm going to show it like real quick. There's this little issue right here on the texture where something's overlapping. One of these, it's pretty easy to fix. If you go into texture paint and probably right there. There it is. So it's just a artifact of the low poly. All you have to do to fix that is you can do a couple of things. You can do this smudge, smear, take your brush smaller, and just blush it out that way. Same thing on the other side. See if we have it anywhere else. Doesn't look like it. Another way we could have avoided that, when we, looks like there's one here. When we went to go render this, you can see how it's sort of low poly. It's getting artifacts from the poly count, the polygons. We can pretty easily fix that by going to modeling, objects, and in our object, taking and applying a subdivision surface modifier. And notice that it just smoothed it out. Can make it just to kind of smooths out all the edges. So if we look at it in wireframe, it just increased the poly count. So that's what it was originally. There it is with 1. There it is with 2. Doesn't really alter the geometry that much. You see where we got some artifacts because of the polygons. Now if we baked it this way, but in order to do that, we'd have to go and break all of these slots, connections to the material. Let me find, look here, you can see one of these. So I'm going to just hit bake. And we got some weirdness on that when we did that, but we could fix that too. Kind of digging the way it looks smoothed out. Anyway, so what we can do is hit bake with the ambient occlusion. It's going to take longer because we're rendering a lot more polygons, but they're going to have a better result.